see, there you go, Tina. I see Chairman Ariano. It's great to see you. Love seeing all the stuff going on in your neck of the woods. Thank you. There you go. Robin Wilson, Chairwoman. Good to see you. Okay, so we're north of 75 participants. It is now 4 o'clock, Brandon. If you would, we are going on recording and live streaming. Again, let anybody know who'd like to follow along. They're welcome to follow along on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. I'm going to give an overview, and then after that overview, I'll also talk about the specific changes that we made in our rules just over the last couple of days to allow us to make it easier for you to have the meetings, and then we'll take questions at the end. So if you would, just save any questions you have. And good afternoon. One clear Texas spring day, a lot less rainy than today. In 2008, I met Myron Goins. I'd voted every time the polls were open, which is why I was there that night, just minutes before they were going to close. I handed my voter registration card to Myron across the table, and he signed me in on those yellow combo sheets, confirming that they had my information right. After I voted using one of those old electronic wheel machines, he smiled and he handed me my I voted sticker. And then he invited me to stick around for our precinct convention. He and the others there that night showed me for the first time how the Republican Party of Texas really works, how it welcomes and encourages input from every Texas Republican. I was immediately hooked, not just hooked on attending the senatorial convention, but contributing to the rules and platform debates, not just going to state convention, but taking my children so they could see how Republican principles are lived out. Not just meeting the wonderful people at all the social gatherings and the parties, but running to be a national delegate. In a few short months, I saw firsthand how the Republican Party of Texas, like no other, empowers its base, and how, as a result, it is uniquely able to leverage the best that our state has to offer. The convention process locked in my commitment to our party. And it is not just how we get some of our work done, how we happen to elect some of the people involved with the party. It is a key part of who we are and what makes us special. And today, exactly 100 days before the RNC convention in Charlotte, where we will nominate President Trump and Vice President Pence for re-election, it is more important than ever that Texas lead the way, that we show everyone that we can and will recover, and that we will do so wisely and safely, and by depending on the individual personal responsibility of Republicans from all over our great state, and by leading by example. We have made a lot of progress on that front, and others, since the last time we were together to discuss the road to convention. Our delegate protection plan was approved in full by the RNC. This means that in spite of having to change our convention date and our delegate allocation method for the 2020 election cycle, long after the deadline for all of that passed, none of that will trigger any penalties, and our delegates will be secured for President Trump. Texas's total 155 delegate strength, the second largest delegation to the Republican National Convention, is fully intact while we proceed with the necessary changes in our process and our date. Those of you on the call today and the rest of the leaders of our nearly 300 conventions ensured that an effort that could have so easily come off the rails instead worked smoothly and efficiently. I am so grateful for everything you did against the odds, and I appreciate you all joining together to make that happen and to make it continue to be a reality as we continue to communicate with you through this process of reopening those conventions that we had to postpone. In the last couple of weeks, we've also had a lot of other news. The courageous Shelley Luther has rightfully captured a lot of people's attention and come to symbolize the push to open Texas for business. And like many of you, I am grateful that due to the quick work of her attorneys and the decision of the Texas Supreme Court, she is no longer in jail. Speaking of her attorneys, a special thank you to her lead counsel, our own SREC committeeman, Warren Norris. Also, thank you to another key member of her legal team, State Representative Briscoe Cain. I also want to share some specific news on that front from an RPT perspective. Anytime you think about Shelley Luther, you should be sure to remember Judge Moye. Dallas District Judge Moye made the decision to put Shelley Luther in jail for refusing to apologize to him for her actions. Let that sink in. People need to remember his name between now and November. All Texans should, but especially voters in Dallas. What you may not know is that thanks to the work of the Republican Party of Texas last year, thanks to our very first candidate recruiting task force led by Hamilton County Chair Kat Parks, and the hard work of the volunteers she recruited, specifically Regional Task Force member Bunny Pounds, Judge Moye has a Republican opponent on the ballot in November. Her name is Jessica Voice Lewis. She needs, and all our Dallas candidates need, your support for November for real change that will positively impact Texans' lives. Now, every time I talk about Shelley Luther, I have also made sure to discuss Anna Isabel Castro Garcia and Brenda Stephanie Mata, both arrested in an outrageous sting operation based on anonymous tips from the public reporting that their home nail salon and their eyelash services were against rules. That the Laredo Police Department set up a task force and sent in undercover police to protect and defend against runaway nail and eyelash services is terrible. That members of the public reported eyelash and nail services to the police is terrible. That as a result, these young women were facing jail time was terrible. But the bottom line is, this is exactly why we have to continue to fight for conservative principles and limited government. Every law, every regulation always has behind it the implication that it must be followed or else. And or else always ultimately comes at the end of a gun with the threat of physical loss of freedom by incarceration that follows shortly after the implied loss of liberty of that new regulation and law. Democrats throughout this whole coronavirus pandemic have shown their true colors. From not letting a good crisis go to waste, whether it's with their egregious, offensive mail-in ballot push nationwide, or throwing women across Texas in jail for wanting to get back to work. We have to be sure voters remember that in November, and we will. This pandemic's exposed a lot of what's important and what's not in both our personal and professional lives, but also in legislative business. A lot has been made about which jobs and which businesses are essential versus non-essential. As we begin to look forward and prepare for next year's legislative session and a budget that will have to face significant reductions in revenue, I would like us to start framing the discussion on the essential and non-essential parts of the Texas state budget. For this to have as much priority as it would have to resist the natural tendency for taxation and spending to continue to increase forever, I'll initiate a task force to oversee this. which I would prefer to operate in coordination with the Legislative Priorities Committee, and I'll be discussing that with SREC Committee Man and Temporary Legislative Priorities Chair Mark Ramsey. All right, let's get back to business on the conventions. Several conventions were underway today. And a common and really important question right now that a lot of county chairs and temporary senatorial district convention chairs have asked is, how can you best comply with CDC, state, and local guidelines and still hold your conventions in person? We know in-person conventions are not just what delegates prefer most, they are also what best protect the full rights for convention delegates. And they are what makes our convention uniquely powerful. We also know that many Texans want to open Texas, and having our convention safely open in person are one big way in which we can lead by example. So our objective is to hold our local and state conventions in person if at all possible. Thursday, the SREC made it possible for us to have backup plans, but we are hoping they are just backup. There's no doubt that meeting in person for the conventions is the ideal. Our delegates' health is, of course, high priority, and we will continue to scrutinize the progress. You all are tenacious, but we also want to provide a safe environment. So here are some suggestions. Ideally, find a location that accommodates 3 times the number of attendees so you can allow social distance. I can tell you we are following this specifically at the state convention. The days of senatorial district caucuses that are knees to elbows, we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? We're spacing things out. And 3 weeks ago, when we had an SREC meeting in Parker County, we had about 60 or 70 people there. It was in a space that was rated for over 400. So we had plenty of room to space people out. Follow that. We are also suggesting hand sanitizer be provided. And at the state convention, there will be a lot of hand sanitizing stations. Also, communicate that the people who want to wear a mask, either to protect themselves or to prevent accidental transmission of anything to the others around them, should be encouraged and should be welcomed to do so. And those who choose not to wear masks should respect the space of those who choose to have them. As we go through this pandemic, we're going to continue to scrutinize advice and orders that are being disseminated. But the biggest thing you can do is minimize close face-to-face interaction. So Thursday night, the SREC met to evaluate and vote on some specific proposed rule changes. Those rule changes were suggested by the working group that was made up of our RPT parliamentarian, Chris Howe, the SREC Rules Committee Chair, Jan Duncan, the State Convention Temporary Rules Committee Chair, Virgil Cruz, past RPT parliamentarians Richard Hayes and Butch Davis, and General Counsel and former County Chair Wade Emmer. All of the changes they proposed and that the SREC passed are designed to make it easier for you, our local leaders, to safely proceed with in-person conventions, to protect the rights of the local delegates while maximizing the ability to provide a safe environment at the same time. These changes will also help support future changes if we need to go on for a full contingency plan for conventions held via phone or electronically. So let me run through the specific rules changes now, and we will also distribute this via email. And they're already up on the website. The rules on our website already reflect these changes. So here's the first one. Obviously, since we didn't have since none of you have, very few of the county or senatorial district conventions were held on March 21st. The law that required that you submit the delegate names 5 days after that meeting doesn't necessarily apply in case you have it towards the end of our window. So now the rule says that you turn in your delegate list to the RPT either 5 days after the convention or by June 27th, 2020 by midnight, whichever is earlier. In practical terms, that means in a worst case scenario, you could have your Senate district or county convention as late as the week after June 20th and still be fine as long as you get your delegate list to us by midnight on June 27th. So that's the first thing, is to give you a long window of time to be able to do it. Second thing, to make it very clear that the county chair in every county has the right to convene or reconvene any precinct convention that wasn't already completely finished. So in some counties, they had the county conventions the Saturday after the primary or the night of the primary or the Thursday after the primary. Great, they had them, they're done, they're fine. But if you're in one of the many, many counties or Senate district areas where your normal plan was to wait and have the precinct conventions right before your Senate district convention, this makes it crystal clear. You, the county chair in the county, have the right to call the date, time, and location of those precinct conventions. And they're allowed to happen right up to before the Senate district or county convention itself. And you have to give 7 days notice. And we want you to give the notice as broadly as you can. So whenever you have your rescheduled conventions, send it out to your email list, post it on your website, make sure you get it to all your precinct chairs, encourage everybody else to spread the word, communicate it as much as you can. Also, send it to us and we will put it up on our website. So that's an additional notice requirement, is that you also send that to us 7 days in advance at least. Third, the specific proper method to convene and notice a county convention or SD convention. Roughly the same thing. You have to do it 7 days in advance. You have to send a copy of the notice to us. You should communicate that new date, time, and location as broadly as possible. Fourth, specifying that temporary committees to Senate and county conventions are allowed to have their temporary committee meetings electronically. So if your nominating committee wants to all meet and interview potential delegates via Zoom meeting, great, knock yourself out. If the rules committee wants to debate rules changes via a shared Google Doc and a conference call, great, knock yourself out. This is now explicitly allowed that your temporary committee meetings can be held electronically. That's temporary committee meetings. Right? You do still have to notice those meetings, right? No, nothing around the notice requirements change, but you can do them electronically. So that diminishes your need for meeting rooms the week in advance of your convention. 5, setting the date for the SRC to submit the names of those they recommend to serve on state convention temporary committees. Normally, all the delegates to state are known right after March 21st. We would have known who all the delegates were. All the SRC members would have long ago already gotten in their recommendation for who would serve on the temporary committee. Instead, we've now put a deadline of June 30th, I believe, or is it July 1st, I think maybe July 1st. Anyway, the SREC members have a deadline that is after June 27th. Okay, so that's the 5th. And just in case any of you don't know, the way that process works, every Senate district has one member on each of the temporary committees, and the main temporary committees are rules, platform, legislative priorities. Those 3 committees work long days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, convention week. There's one member from every Senate district. The way it works is if the SREC committee man and woman agree on who it is, and only delegates to convention are qualified to be appointed to serve on the temporary committees. But as long as they agree on a delegate that they recommend, that is the person who will serve on that committee. If they disagree, I'm required to choose between their 2 recommendations. I'm not allowed to just randomly pick somebody else. I will have to choose between their 2 recommendations. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 6, allowing county or Senate district conventions to meet in adjacent counties if necessary. So, for example, if you're in Dallas County and Dallas County's county judge is being particularly mercurial or temperamental or tyrannical, you could meet in any one of the adjoining counties and avoid having to worry about it. Let's see, and then the other practical implication of this, because it specifies that you're allowed to do it as long as you do that by the deadline for notice. If you had voted last year to combine all your locations, that's no longer so. As you're resetting your conventions, you could set them for separate locations if you have multiple Senate districts in one county and you had planned on putting them together. Quite possible, again, it'll be easier to find another location that could accommodate and give you the spacing you need if you didn't have them all combined. Also, a suggestion I got today was consider strongly really unusual alternative venues. We had our SREC committee meeting in Parker County at the sheriff's posse location where they sometimes have, rodeos and animal shows, right? You be creative. What you need is a big safe space. That's it. Let's see, that's 6. Number 7, adjusting the date for credential challenges. Oh, obviously, since we won't know who all the delegates are until June 27th, we're delaying the deadline for providing credentials challenges. It has to come after the 27th, but it has to be before the convention starts on the 16th. Therefore, the deadline is now July 4th. So any challenges to credentials have to be sent on by no later than July 4th. Let's see. Yeah, so those are the 7 rules changes. We have worked together to steer the RPT and all our conventions through this pandemic, through the challenges. And we're going to continue to do so to make sure we are in full compliance with all our rules, with parliamentary procedure, and also to make sure we protect and defend the rights of our delegates at their local and state conventions. We are taking great care as we move forward to abide by local and state orders while maintaining the rights of our delegates. It is our full intention to hold our state convention in Houston in July with all our plans are on track. As we have been, we continue to carefully monitor the local and state conventions regarding the pandemic. We are in frequent contact with leaders in Houston and at our convention facility. As of just 2 days ago, Houston convention planners and hotel staff have been meeting to prepare to welcome us and accommodate all the guidelines for our conventions. All of this work we've been talking about has one objective in mind: delivering Texas's electoral college votes successfully for President Trump in November, and victories for all our candidates, from the White House to courthouses all over Texas. We are completely focused on winning in November and not risking any loss of momentum. We are on track for convention. We are on track for victory in November, and we are on track to deliver our electoral college votes for President Trump. We are facing unprecedented challenges, and we have risen to the challenge. This is a time, and these are challenges that we will conquer as long as we stay united. As President Trump says, we are all in this together. And at the RPT, we are fully focused on winning for President Trump in November and all our Republican nominees across Texas. We are working around the clock to ensure Texas delivers its votes for President Trump and keeps our majorities in Texas strong this year. We have to work together to win together in November 2020. Because of all the vision and foresight we had and the hard work we put in, we have the best slate of candidates we've had. We ended 2019 with a record $4.4 million cash on hand. And we went into this pandemic with 50 field staff, more than twice the field staff of the 2016 and 2018 election peaks combined. And our 10K for 10R program, which is focused on recruiting 10,000 volunteers to each register 10 new Republican voters, already has over 3,500 volunteers and has already registered over 85,000 new Texas Republican voters. We are on track to exceeding our 100,000 goal well ahead of schedule. And RPT staff and volunteers last month made over 130,000 calls that month alone, because we are committed to delivering Texas's vote for President Trump. That is what we are all about this year. We are going to stay focused on doing this, and leading the way on opening the state and having our convention safely is a critical part of that. Thank you for your time today. And now I'll be glad to take your questions. And the first hand raised is Steve Evans.
Hi, Chairman. Thanks for taking my question. The average age of my delegation generally to county convention is pretty high.
Yes.
I have some concern about being able to meet a quorum. I go out and plan, and we were able to get a venue, and we're looking at a very large venue to accommodate the distancing, but I'm still worried about making the minimum quorum. Has there been any discussions about reducing the quorum or looking at that rule?
Okay, so I've got great news on that front. For convention, quorum is those present. So you will make quorum.
I love
it.
The
thing I would encourage everybody, two big things I would say. One, I would encourage everybody, especially to the extent they are concerned, great, come prepared. Bring hand sanitizer, wear a mask. We'll make sure that you have plenty of space. We will accommodate you as much as possible. And I'm sorry, let me be really clear. Quorum is a majority of those registered. So it's a majority of those who show up that morning and register to be part of the convention. So you would only bust quorum if you had a bunch of people come and then more than a majority left. So I took it to mean your biggest concern was that they wouldn't come at all. If they don't come at all, they don't affect quorum. So that wouldn't be a problem. The other thing I would tell you is those same people who are most likely to be at risk and most likely, therefore, we should accommodate from a personal protective equipment and from a spacing kind of standpoint, they're also the most likely to have difficulty with any kind of electronic alternative. And so we are all making do with a set of suboptimal choices. But with the right effort and the right attitude, we can certainly move forward positively on that standpoint. Okay, Mr. Stein, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Anything, by the way, when did you shave?
A couple hours ago.
Okay. But is there anything you expect the governor to say Monday that would ease restrictions? Any surprises or anything you anticipate?
I fully expect the state to continue on its path of opening. The governor has been consistent on that front. In fact, he had originally said, if you look at his first announcement on the 1st, he had said, we're going to be doing some stuff on the 18th, and I will probably have things, I will have information on salons and the like before the 18th. And sure enough, he did. It was earlier this week, I believe the 11th or 12th when he did that. So far, he's been completely consistent on looking for the right ways to open Texas as quickly as possible. Okay, so I see one question. What if the county still limits you to no more than 10 individuals? Well, a couple of things. One, you do have the freedom to go over the county line. So if you can get a location that's just outside your county that isn't a massive problem for your county residents, that would be a great thing to do. Second thing would be, to the extent you're restricted, to the extent there's a possibility that the restrictions may drop at the end of the month, then you could assume that you're best off having your convention June 6th or 13th or 20th. Because if you called any one of those, you got 7 days notice. You could call any one of them, take steps that you're comfortable it's going to be safe. But then if the county still won't let you have it, if you've still got restrictions that prevent you completely from having it, then you'd still have the chance to take a week's notice and call an electronic meeting. So that leaves you the flexibility to revert to the backup only as a last resort, but as a last resort before it's too late. Yeah, Mr. Stein, you still got your hand up, but I presume we got you covered. Any other? First of all, thank you, everybody. We had over 115 people on for a chunk of this, and that's fantastic. Not even counting the people following along on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you all for joining us. And are there any other questions I can take from anybody? Mr. Pratt. Oh, you're on mute. Hang on, there we go.
Thank you, Chairman.
You got
in years past conventions, we've been able to have some of our delegates to volunteer, and there was a volunteer placed on the website. I don't see that now.
We do have a page application. I will ask, I'll ask Brandon to share where that is located. I don't know off the top of my head where that's located, but we do still have the option for people to volunteer at state convention, yes. Great question, thank you. Mr. Stein, your hand's still up. Should I follow up on that?
No, I'm good. I was just trying to find where to take it off, sorry.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm trying to unraise the hand.
How'd you raise it?
No, I'm trying to unraise it.
The rules that are already on the website. They're not highlighted, so it's not super crazy obvious where they are, but they are already included. If you pull down today's rules, you'll be fine. Okay, Mr. Offerman.
Yeah, thank you for having this meeting.
You bet.
is, since we're in a very fluid situation, have you considered, well, my first question is, have any of the conventions that have held their convention already had any lessons learned experience? Because that might be valuable to the rest of us who haven't scheduled our convention yet.
We intend, there were a handful of conventions that are meeting today. We intend to get their feedback on what kind of response and reaction they're going to be. I know there are a decent number next week, and we will definitely have people at those next week as well to get feedback on those. We will share lessons learned and insights, absolutely. And I know Dwayne is on. I know the TRCCA has been wanting to pay, has been paying very close attention to this and wanting to help spread the word. I'm sure they will help get feedback and distribute feedback as well. Oh, great. There's a link in Mr. Pratt. There's a link in the chat window that has the link to the state convention page application. It's a Google Doc, and the link is there in the chat window. Yeah, great question, Mr. Hoffman. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And let's see, I saw a question. Yeah, so I saw a couple questions. One from if conducting a convention online, how do they do that? Well, so that's we are not yet talking about details on actually conducting a convention online. Our strong preference is that the Texas State Convention is a proof point opening Texas and a proof point for the president to successfully have his convention in North Carolina 100 days from today. So our first step was to do everything we could do to make it, to give you the most flexibility you could possibly have to have an in-person convention. That said, we did talk specifically about having electronic or phone temporary committee meetings. There is a notice requirement for temporary committee meetings. In that notice, you would need to provide the information about where to go to get to the link to participate. You would also need to go where to go to get the link to the information that has to be shared if it's electronic. So, for example, one of the examples I threw out, you could have a rules committee working on temporary rules. You could have the conversation be by phone and the committee working on a Google Doc. Well, your notice would need to provide the information about how to join by phone and the information for the link for the Google Doc, so that people could follow along while they're having the stuff. That would be in your notice for your temporary committee meetings. So let's see, I think that addressed that question. And yeah, I think that got that. So we are going to provide a backup last resort option for how to do a convention electronically or telephonically, should you absolutely have no option. But Thursday night, we had the 4th electronic meeting of the SREC. It was less than 70 people participating, who all know each other, who all have each other's phone numbers, who all have each other's emails, who all had multiple days notice of everything that was going to be discussed, who all had a copy in advance of everything that was going to be discussed. We looked at 7 potential rules amendments, all of which passed nearly unanimously, only a couple of which needed amendments at all. So think about all of that compared to what a convention looks like, where most of the people don't even know in advance who's going to show. Most of the people don't know any of the other people. They certainly haven't had days in advance to talk about things. They certainly haven't had days in advance to float all of the potential ideas or all of the potential amendments. Those 7 rules adjustments that all passed nearly unanimously with only a couple of amendments took 2 hours. So, and as I've talked to some folks originally about considering an electronic meeting alternative, the impression that an electronic meeting is in some way panacea does not match up with my experience at all. So I would just encourage you, if you were thinking that, I would encourage you to take a look at the actual evidence available right now to see how that goes. Let's see. The link for for all volunteers to sign up for the convention is, not surprisingly, on the Convention 2020 webpage that you can get to from going to texasgop.org. Go to texasgop.org. There's a link for conventions. There's a 2020 state convention link to that. There is a form you can fill out to volunteer. Liz has her hand up. Liz.
I was just going to ask, so for those committee meetings, you have to post the Zoom meeting information and make it totally public, not just to the committee members.
Correct.
Totally public. So
Correct.
you can have the Zoom bombing and all that kind of stuff going on.
We have had dozens of Zoom events, and where people were getting Zoom bombed was when they used the 9-digit login code with no password. And so it wasn't an issue that the sign-on was public, it's that a random number generator could just find it and people could just jump in.
So you put the meeting number out there, but everybody has to have a password, you're saying?
Well, no, there's the new default setting in Zoom is that your meeting automatically has a password. That converts it from a 9-digit number to get access to a 9-digit number with a multi-digit, multi-alphanumeric code that has to match that 9-digit number. And you've just increased the likelihood of somebody bombing you many fold. The other big security thing that everyone should be doing if you're doing Zoom, and I believe it's the new default setting, is set it so that only the host can share their screen, so that random other people can't share their screen. And you can also enable the waiting room. In my experience, the waiting room hasn't really helped a lot because we don't necessarily know their names, right? When members of the public are coming in, it says Steve Evans wants to come in. Well, I don't know it's that Steve Evans. And I'm trying to remember, was Steve, one of the delegates who was eligible, so in my experience, waiting room's not that powerful. But using the default password functionality, super powerful, and simply refusing to let anyone share their screen except a host. If you do those two changes, it's unlikely anyone you don't want in can actually get in. It is then impossible for them to do some of the reprehensible things like share porn to the group and stuff like that. Great question.
Thank you.
Zoom has undergone a trial by fire that has made a lot of changes in the last month and a half, and rightfully so. Let's see. Yeah, I do want to thank all the everybody on this line. First of all, thank you for taking some of a Saturday afternoon. Thank you for volunteering to make these senatorial district and county conventions a success. I meant what I said. This is an amazing process, and it makes a huge difference. And it's one of the things that we are uniquely amazing about. And it's all of this that makes it possible. I take very seriously our responsibility to try to help you pull off successfully this key thing. So I hope through everything else that comes through. And which, by the way, you are all anytime welcome to reach out to me or anybody on staff. Almost all our contact info is online. If you don't already know my cell number, it's 512-623-0276. Give me a holler. Every once in a while, my wife wishes I wasn't quite as accessible as I am. But as we were talking earlier, it really is key. It's very important. Okay, Alice, you have a question.
Yes, do I have the right, if people don't want to wear masks, to put them all the way in the back and the people with the masks in the front, or am I going to go to jail?
Okay, so this is actually a really important deal. One part of being really successful in this is counting on our folks to take personal responsibility, including the personal responsibility for being courteous and polite Texans, right? So I wouldn't necessarily suggest anything blanket like, hey, if you're not wearing a mask, you have to go in the back. But I would absolutely, I would make it clear. I would have a handful of masks available. I mean, we did at our SRC meeting. We offer some masks for sale, for donations. We offer some really cool like Texas flag masks and stuff. We had them available. If anybody wanted to wear one, they are more than welcome to. We encourage them to. We certainly don't slight them for doing so. And we ask everybody else to just be thoughtful of those who are wearing a mask, whether they're doing that to be considerate of others or to watch out for themselves. In 99% of the cases, just asking people to be thoughtful for each other will be enough. And the culture that we set in this is the important thing. And so if we're setting the message of, look, I mean, this is a serious thing. We are setting the roadmap for reopening Texas and safely showing that the RNC can have the president's convention in North Carolina in August. The North Carolina governor is not necessarily a friend and may not want us to do it. So everything we can do to make sure our conventions get pulled off without a hitch is important, because it will be proof points that we can use to help get Texas open successfully faster. So certainly encourage that. Thank you guys very, very much. And if there are no other questions, I thank you for your time. I will respect it. If you need anything, reach out to me, jrdickey@texasgop.org. You have my phone. I appreciate you. I love you guys. I can't wait to see you at the convention. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.